Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Today we're going to learn about qualitative purpose statements and research questions. Purpose statements and research questions for quantitative and qualitative studies. There are some differences between quantitative and qualitative studies in terms of purpose statements and research questions. The first, for quantitative study, it uses hypotheses. For qualitative study, it only has research questions. And then for quantitative study, it identifies variables. For qualitative study, it gathers information on a single concept. So here for qualitative study, you do not need to identify the variables, just gather information on a single concept. And the third, quantitative study, it tests theories. For qualitative studies, it share ideas and build general themes. And the research questions for quantitative study are in the form of closed-ended or unchangeable research questions. For qualitative studies, the research questions are in the form of open-ended research questions. The last one, for quantitative study, it measures differences and the magnitude. And for qualitative studies, about a deep understanding of the views of one group or single individual. Those are the differences between quantitative and qualitative studies in the form of purpose statements and research questions. The central phenomenon in qualitative research. Central phenomenon means the concept or a process explored in qualitative research. The example of the central phenomenon as a concept, the ethnic of Chinese American immigrants. As a process, example, the process of negotiation by a female superintendent with her principals. Those are the examples of the central phenomenon, both as a concept and as a process. As a concept, it tells about the characteristics and so on. As a process, it tells about the steps, procedures. Still about the central phenomenon in qualitative research. How researchers explain or predict variables versus exploring or understanding a central phenomenon. Explaining or predicting variables is for quantitative studies, while exploring or understanding a central phenomenon is for qualitative studies. For quantitative studies, they are explaining or predicting variables. For example, there are two variables, x and y. The independent variables x influences a dependent variable y. The example, how do alienation and isolation relate for the female superintendent, relating to or more ideas. And more example, how do female principals and superintendent compare in their alienation. For the second example, it compares groups. And for qualitative research, it is understanding or exploring a central phenomenon, understanding why in depth, and also understanding and knowing the external forces, external factors shaped and are shaped by why. So in qualitative research, we do not explain or predict the variables. Instead, qualitative research understands or explores a central phenomenon. Emerging processes in qualitative research. Emerging processes mean the intent or purpose of the study and the questions asked by the researcher may change during the process of a study on feedback or responses from participants. So for qualitative research is an emerging design. The questions that want to be answered may change based on the responses coming from the participants. So it is called as an emerging processes in qualitative research. Have a look at this table about emerging questions in qualitative research. Example, for the first or initial organizing questions, what are high school students' experiences with smoking tobacco? It is initial organizing questions as the start of the project. And the shaped question based on the responses coming from the participants. Where do they smoke at or near the high school? It is shaped questions as initial data collection. And then the question will be when they try to quit smoking. Where does this occur at or near the school? It is further shaped question as a continued data collection. For qualitative purpose statement, it is the intent to explore or understand the central phenomenon with specific individual at certain research site. The template or the script. The purpose of this qualitative will be to blah blah blah, to explore or to discover or to understand or to describe the central phenomenon for participants at research site. Example Croatia. The purpose of this qualitative is to describe classroom learning using the internet for 5 high school students participating in a sign language class. That is the purpose of qualitative study. When you want to make your own qualitative purpose statement, you may use this formula, this script. Yeah. The purpose of this qualitative will be to blah 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 for blah 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 at blah blah blah. Yeah. For qualitative research question, those are open-ended general questions that the researcher would like answered during the study placed at the end of the introduction. For the central questions, the overarching question you explore in a research study. A sample script. What is central phenomenon for participant at research site? So this one is the template for making central question. Example Croatia. What is the creativity for 5 students at Roosevelt High School? And we come to the problems typically found in central questions in qualitative research. The problems are too general, too focused, too laden with assumption. The poor example of a central question when it is too general, what's going on here? This is questions, a central question which is too general. For the better example of a central question, what is the process being used by the General Education Committee at the Liberal Arts School? Following the formula that I have already explained to you to make better example. Please don't be too general. How did the committee make a curriculum decision about course on the environment? It is too focused. The better example perhaps can be what is the process of the curriculum committee in making decision about courses. So don't be too specific. Don't be too general. Don't be too specific. And then the next one, too laden with assumptions. how did the curriculum committee address its alienation from the college administration? And the better example, what was the role of the college administration in the curriculum committee's deliberations? We come to sub-questions. Sub-questions are open-ended, emerging, natural in language, few in number, refining the central question into sub-questions to be addressed in the research. Sub-questions consist of two kinds of sub-question. The first one is issue sub-questions. Issue sub-questions are questions that narrow the focus of the central question into specific questions or issues that researcher seeks to learn from participants in a study. The formula can be what is the sub-question issue for participant, it is optional. At research site, it is also optional information. Example question, for the central question, what is self-esteem for high school students? For sub-question, what is self-esteem as seen through friends? So it narrows the focus of the central question into specific questions or issues. The second one is procedural question. The steps to be used in analyzing the data in a qualitative study. So we talk about the steps in procedural question. So it must be step by step. What question will be answered first? What question will be answered second? What question will be answered third? Example, what are students' experiences with weapons in high schools? It is central question. The first question that must be answered, and then the second question, what are the categories of experiences of students? Sub-question, the first sub-questions, what process occurs that reflects these experiences? It is also sub-question. And what propositions or hypotheses reflect the relationship among the categories? The third sub-question. The first, the second, and the third questions must be answered hierarchically. Okay, then type of sub-questions in qualitative research. This table summarize the explanation that I have just given to you. Issue sub-questions to subdivide the central question into detailed question, while procedural questions to subdivide the central question into steps for data collection during the study. For central question in issue sub-questions, what does it mean to be a professional teacher? Issue sub-questions, what do professional teachers do? What is difficult or easy about being a professional educator? And when did the teacher become aware of being professional? Those are issue sub-questions following central question. The next one is about procedural sub-questions. For procedural sub-questions, the central question may be what is the change process in the revision of a general education curriculum on a college campus. For procedural questions, how did the process unfold? Who were the people involved? What events occurred? What was the outcome? So it is about steps for data collection during the study. Okay, thank you for your attention to this explanation. At last, wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.